Hello everyone, Gabby here, and before we get back to today's episode, I would like to thank our sponsor, HelloFresh. So if you know anything about me, you know that I absolutely do not enjoy cooking. I don't like going to the grocery store. I don't like having to figure out recipes, and then I'm really impatient because I'm so busy. Just standing there, knowing that I could be working, it kills me, you guys. And that's where HelloFresh comes in. Whether you're craving a hearty comfort food, trying to please picky eaters, or looking for a calorie smart meal plan, HelloFresh has all of those options and more available on a rotating menu of 50 recipes to choose from every week. They take the guesswork out of your daily meal prep routine, which is huge, especially if you're very busy. Plus, every single recipe is easily customizable, so each meal is just the way you like it. There's always options available to trade or upgrade proteins or swap out side dishes. So don't waste time. Get 10 free meals at hellofresh.com/freemo. Applied across 7 boxes. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. That's 10 free HelloFresh meals. Just go to hellofresh.com/FREEMOE. Freemo.
Hello, everybody. Brenna here.
And I'm stuck. I'm stuck with you, but this is like the first time that I'm doing it here with you, actually, this time instead of with Gabby.
And This is the Mystery of Everything podcast. Woo!
Mystery, why the hell am I here?
Steve is subbing in for Gab because I did not realize that this episode would be terrifying, and that is my bad.
It's insomnia, right?
Yeah. It's insomnia.
For anyone who is curious about this right now, my wife, she is utterly terrified of not being able to sleep because she will quite literally go crazy. And I say that, I mean, you know how like people will take medications in order to sleep and that kind of thing? She used to take those. And if she does not sleep after taking one of those, she doesn't get high. She gets like psychosis. Crazy. She starts seeing things and and then it makes her panic and then she can't sleep.
Oh, that would suck. Like the Hat Man.
Yeah, it's one of those freaky things. Like when she was pregnant and she was on Unisom, because for anyone who has ever been pregnant, Unisom is one of those things
is a lifesaver.
Yeah, well, they give it to you, and it's funny because they give it to you like, oh yeah, this is a thing for nausea. It's not for nausea. Unisom is a sleeping pill.
Literally. Just a sleeping pill. I'm on Unisom right now. Well, you're not supposed to be nauseous into your second trimester. I'm 23 weeks right now. And I'm so sick. So today is my first day without Unisom, and I've threw up 3 times.
That was Gabby's life.
Unisom is a lifesaver.
You can't throw up if you're passed out, or you can, but usually that's when people end up dying in those scenarios, but for drugs and other stuff.
Sorry if you guys hear Lillian. Hush. Steve, can you hear Lily?
I did not hear.
Okay. Well, if she's bad, we can always edit her out. But yeah, Unisom is a legit lifesaver, but it doesn't make me sleepy anymore. Like when I take it, I'm not sleepy in the slightest. I guess I'm used to it after taking it every day for months. I don't know.
It can really mess with you. Now, that would be really bad if you had insomnia.
Yeah, that would be very bad. Almost like a family curse. Like a curse of insomnia, which is what our episode's about today.
Wait, so it's about someone actually being cursed with insomnia, not just like actual medical insomnia?
Not just, well, it is medical, but it also is a familial curse.
You're going to need to explain this.
I will. We will go into great detail on this. Nothing brings the family together like family curses. And the majority of family curses are up for debate on their legitimacy. However, the one I'm about to discuss is very much real and very much terrifying. Hence why Gab is not here with us, because I will be lucky if I can sleep tonight. So, yeah, it's not the best. What we're going to be discussing is called fatal familial insomnia. It is very rare. And it is fatal, like the name describes. The disease can be dated back to its earliest description around the 1700s, maybe like 1765. So there was an Italian man with symptoms that would suggest today that he was suffering with FFI, fatal familial insomnia. But FFI wouldn't be clinically documented and identified until 1986 by a man named Lugaresi. I might not be saying that right.
For Lugresi.
Steve's got it. Steve's got it down. Normally, Gab is my pronunciation gal, so today it is Steve. Also, in today's day and age, we know that this is not, in fact, a family curse in the sense that they thought it was a family curse during that time period, but it is an inherited prion disease that leads to sleep becoming impossible because of the extent of neurodegeneration that the person goes through.
Wait, so it destroys your brain so much that you're physically incapable of sleeping?
Yeah, it's so bad. And it doesn't just, it's not just like, oh, I can't sleep. The symptoms are terrible. We're going to dive into them, but...
Yeah, it's a good thing that Gabby is not here because now she would call it quits at this exact moment. Just hearing that phrase in the first place, she's out.
Oh, I literally didn't even cross my mind that this would be a no Gab episode, but it makes sense. It's awful. It is very terrifying. So before we knew about this genetic disease, it would be easy to understand why people in the past thought that their entire family was cursed. The disease has a 50-50 shot of being passed down to the children of those affected.
Whoa.
50-50.
A 50, regardless of gender?
No, regardless of gender, 50-50.
So you could have a whole family, and it's only a chance, right? So it's not like you have 10 kids, 5 of them have it, 5 of them don't. You could have 7 of them that have it, and 3 of them don't. It's just a chance to go down.
It's just a chance. So I actually watched an episode. The show is called... Shit, I have it written down on here. The show is called Something's Killing Me. If you have Max, you should watch it because it's good. Don't watch it if Gabby's around. But the episode is called The Family Curse, episode 5. And there are siblings on there, a boy and a girl whose mother passed away like very recently. The episode was filmed in 2017 and they were 30 at this point in time. But their mother passed away of the disease. And the only other person in their family who had it was their grandmother. So, and then they looked at the rest of the family history and they had no signs of showing it. So I guess their grandmother's DNA was essentially like a typo, is how they described it. And then that typo has now been passed down to their mother who passed away. And then to them, statistically speaking, they had a 50-50 shot of getting it. They got their blood drawn and tested for it, and they both have it.
Oh.
Yeah. So they are donating spinal fluid right now because your brain, cerebral fluid goes down into your spine so they can do a spinal tap and use that fluid to kind of get a picture of the disease itself. So they are essentially donating themselves to science to try to find a cure because they're on a ticking time bomb. They're 30, and we will discuss in just a second, but the average age for onset is 50. So
it's not the worst. It's not children getting cancer then at the age of 5.
But can you just imagine, I don't know, I panic. As is, I have OCD. So the thought of knowing, I do have this, there's no 50-50 anymore. I 100% am going to die of this. If I live to be that long in the first place, I will die of it. And
I
there's
feel
no
like
cure.
it's a catch-22 in that sense, because what's going to end up happening, right, is that you get sick with this, or you know that you are sick with it, even if the symptoms have not started. But one of the symptoms, I'm guessing, because you're going to explain this, right, is actually you are physically incapable of sleeping, right?
Yeah.
So you would have so much anxiety then about not being able to sleep that you may think that the symptoms have started when that's actually just your own anxiety that is restricting you from sleeping.
Yeah,
that is horrifying.
The siblings are a boy and a girl. The sister is older, and then the brother is younger brother. But she talks about when you haven't slept in a minute and your brain gets a little fuzzy because you're so tired. But anytime that happens to her, she's like, oh, could this be the onset of my symptoms occurring, or then she'll lay down and she won't be able to fall asleep. And she's like, oh shit, this is the start of my symptoms. When in reality, it's just like any of us who sometimes we can't sleep, but I would be in a constant state of panic.
Oh,
I know. It would be rough. It would be very rough. Okay, so 50-50 shot of being passed down to the children. The onset of symptoms usually doesn't begin until later in life. So the symptoms can start between like your 20s, but it can go between 20 and 61 years old, average being around 50. And usually within 18 months, you will go from like a normal, healthy, functioning human being to suffering through this long period of like physical, cognitive, psychological decline before your untimely death.
yeah, I would guess. Hold on. Like once it enters the point in which you cannot sleep, what was the like, how long could a person last physically without sleep? Was it 3 days?
Well, I do think it is 3 days, but with FFI, it's weird because you're not sleeping, but you're kind of sleeping. I'm going to get into it. You can never get into deep sleep. So you're never going to get into the type of sleep that is necessary for your brain to repair itself, which is why some of the symptoms include like dementia, hallucinations, because we know that when you don't get sleep, you lose your marbles.
Yeah.
We've all heard of Steve, is the Russian sleep experiment a real thing?
What, oh, you mean the where they would do experiments on like sleep deprivation and specifically forcing people to not be able to sleep in order to like brainwash them?
Yes, I've always heard about that, but then I wasn't sure if that
real.
was like a real thing or not, because
the CIA and the KGB engaged in so many interesting things. Like the amount of things that they would experiment with like drugs, like straight up LSD, among other kinds of things, are wild. I'll give you this as a prime example. And this isn't even a thing that they did for mind control. This is just one of the attempted things. You know how obviously there were multiple assassination attempts against Fidel Castro?
yes.
One of the things that they tried to do, instead of assassinating him because they figured that was going to be too hard at one point, is they tried to lace his recording studio where he would go on just hour-long radio rants with hallucinogens. And the whole point of it was that they tried to lace it so that he would start to feel the effects. It wouldn't kill him because they wouldn't be able to do this, but they hoped that by doing this, it would make him go crazy while on the air and just start spouting off nonsense to discredit him, to destabilize things.
That's insane. Me and Gabby were talking about, it was in one of our last episodes. I don't know. I was on a forensic files kick, but one of the murderers we talked about in college would put hallucinogenics on his door handle and like his refrigerator to figure out who was stealing his food. That reminds me of that.
I've seen people do that at work with like moldy items and other stuff to like who gets sick.
But hallucinogens, like that is to the extreme.
Yeah.
I could not imagine.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. The holidays are here, and you know what that means. It's time to get your friends and family the gifts they deserve. Take the stress out of shopping with Amazon's great deals and low prices on a huge range of items from toys to tech and much more. Whoever you're gifting for, Amazon has great prices on everything you need this holiday season. Shop Black Friday week starting November 21st.
From the creators of the popular science show with millions of YouTube subscribers comes the Minute Earth podcast. Every episode of the show dives deep into a science question you might not even know you had. But once you hear the answer, you'll want to share it with everyone you know. Why do rivers curve? Why did the T-Rex have such tiny arms? And why do so many more kids need glasses now than they used to? Spoiler alert, it isn't screen time. Our team of scientists digs into the research and breaks it down into a short, entertaining explanation, jam-packed with science facts and terrible puns. Subscribe to Minute Earth wherever you like to listen.
Okay, so, there's no cure. Oh, here we go. According to a scientific article called Genetic and Rare Disease of the CNS, Part 1, Fatal Familial Insomnia, the symptoms of the disease come in stages. So these stages begin at stage 1. The first stage is identified by the subacute onset of insomnia. So that is what you're going to notice first is that you are having trouble sleeping. And it'll worsen over a few months and cause psychiatric symptoms such as phobia, paranoia, and panic attacks. During this time, patients also may report lucid dreaming.
I mean, I guess, yeah, if you're not like really sleeping well at that point,
No.
yeah.
If you're never getting into that REM sleep, that like reparative part necessary for healing of the brain, then yeah, not good. You're gonna experience some psychiatric symptoms. So then in the next 5-month period, psychiatric symptoms worsen along with worsening insomnia. And then the patients begin to experience hallucinations, autonomic dysfunction in the form of sympathetic hyperactivity is seen. Then stage 3, the short stage around 3 months is typically dominated by total insomnia and complete sleep-wake cycle disruptions. So I watched some videos of it. In that show I mentioned previously, a lot of this is from that show, and it is very good. I highly recommend watching it. Super good stuff. But they show the actual videos of one of the people I'm about to talk about. They show videos of him, and you can literally watch him, like his eyes are just staring off into space. And you know when you fall asleep, but let's say you're in class or something and you fall asleep and you'll like jerk back awake.
Yeah.
It is just that repeatedly.
Oh, that's not pleasant.
24/7, and you can't speak. I'm getting ahead of myself, but during the final bits of your brain deteriorating, like you have no means of communication. It's just constant sleep-wake cycles. So final stage of the disease can last 6 months or more and is defined by rapid cognitive decline and dementia. Patients experience an inability to voluntarily move or speak, which is followed by a coma and eventual death.
That it sounds like hell on earth.
Literally, it sounds like torture, like a form of torture. These poor people. And they're so brave too. Like the majority of them, or at least in like today's society, the majority of people that have this diagnosis are essentially donating themselves to science. So like they know what is going to happen to them. They've seen it happen in their family members, and they're still like, okay, let's do this, but let's do this in a recorded setting so you can monitor me. So maybe my future family members don't have to go through this as well. Which kudos to them. Yeah, it gets rough. So we're going to travel to 1986, where the man we previously mentioned that I can't pronounce his name, Lugaresi, maybe.
Yeah, Lugaresi. Like that's literally just what it would be, Lugaresi.
Lugaresi, okay. He was the first to clinically document this disease. So what did he discover and how did he discover it? He wasn't alone in his endeavors. There was another man, Dr. Ignacio Reuter, involved. These men were a pair of neurologists who specialized in sleep studies. Their main focus was identifying the clinical and pathological nature of the disease. One of the things they noticed was the extreme degree of cell death in the thalamus, leading to a spongiform degeneration of the brain. So below is an image showing the neural loss and spongiosis in fatal familial insomnia. This part's not important, but it's using, I guess it's important to some, not really important to our case. But the picture below is using hematoxylin and eosin staining on the left side, and then Nissl staining on the right side. But it is just, I don't know. It's so wild to me that like a genetic mutation can trigger diseases that literally eat your brain.
I mean, you can see it. So obviously this is stuff that would go on a Patreon so that people can see it. But
yes. Yeah, I will post it so you all can see it.
If you're just looking at dark spots and then you don't know what is what while looking at
this. It looks like a sponge.
It looks like a sponge, and like half of the pieces of the sponge have just disappeared.
Yeah. It literally looks like a sponge. And this is people's brains. Their brains are turning into sponge. So anyways, back to the history. Why is the spongiform degeneration pattern important in the first place? Mad cow disease. So this discovery linked FFI to mad cow disease, also known as bovine spongiform encephalopathy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a mouthful. So while the symptoms for the two vary, how the disease manifests in the brain showed commonalities, particularly in the method of destruction, the spongy. So when it came to studying fatal familial insomnia, considering it was a genetic disease, it did make the research easier. This sounds shitty to say, but because it attacks families, that's going to help out with the research.
Because you can actually trace it. You're not looking for random populations
You're not looking
that you
for
are
random
difficult
patients.
to find it. Because they're not going to have someone randomly show up. You can go, oh, hey, this person's uncle has it. Therefore, there is a decent chance that they may have it as well. So you can ask and track it because you actually have a record of it. I mean, that's, I guess, the strength of genetic diseases.
I know you don't have to travel far to continually find patients, which sucks. But in the sense of research, it is, I mean, I don't want to say it's nice because it's not nice, but you can study entire families. So the researchers now know these symptoms for the disease, and they know the destruction of the brain that it causes, but they don't exactly know the why of why it is happening. So before our neurologist duo clinically documented the disease in 1986, there was Stanley Ben Prusiner. He was the director of the Institute for Neurodegenerative
Diseases.
That is hard for me to say. At the University of California, he was the one who identified the prion as a pathogenic self-replicating protein associated with the spongiform degeneration in the 1970s. But the problem with this is that nobody took Stanley seriously until around 1977 because he won a Nobel Prize. Or yes, 1997, because he won a Nobel Prize in physiology and medicine. So he figured this out in the 1970s, but no one gave a shit until 1997 because they're like, he has a Nobel Prize now.
Yeah, that's one of the things that happen. It's like there's all those different points in history when talking about medical history of people just shitting on someone who came to the understanding, well, that's not the accepted science of the day. And then turns out 10, 15, 20 years later, oh, crap, they were right. And now hundreds of thousands of lives potentially could have been saved. Well, depending upon the disease, you know.
Yeah. Which we still don't have a cure today, but I mean, we're getting closer every day, and now it's actually being paid attention to, which is a good thing. So the first identified case of fatal familial insomnia was from a man known as Silvano. He was an Italian man who began to notice symptoms of his family curse coming to light. He lived in Venice, Italy, and everyone in the town would speak about this family curse. Like everyone in Venice was like, oh, the Silvano family, they all have this curse. They're all dying. And his shit, you can trace it back hundreds of years, like his familial line, which is cool, but also not cool because everyone in his family dies.
Yeah, and you'd have a large amount of them that die in these really horrible ways that you know are that's again, it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant.
Not pleasant. And his goes all the way back to the 1700s. Like they can trace that shit. So in the past, doctors would list his family's causes of death as like encephalitis or nervous exhaustion and even schizophrenia. But then his onset of symptoms happened, and he did try to find medical researchers to help him because he knew what was about to happen. He didn't know what it was, but he had watched enough of his family members die and heard about it throughout history that he was like, oh, I'm next. So he noticed the onset of his symptoms while on a cruise with his mother. He was dancing with her, and then he started to sweat profusely, which to me, I sweat all the time. So no part of me would be like, this is it.
Wow, I have trouble sleeping and I sweat a lot. Ah, well, great. That's basically my life as it is.
He also looked in the mirror and he noticed his eyes look different, which is, it is like a symptom, like your pupils will shrink or something like that. And he noticed it. And then he started to lose weight. So he was like, this is the trifecta. It is my time. And he was 53 years old.
Oh.
Yeah. Which I don't want to say, we're going to discuss in a little bit one of the earlier cases. So 53 is obviously not good, but it could be worse. So Silvano checks into this sleep clinic in the University of Bologna in Italy. He tells Dr. Pietro Cortelli that he cannot sleep. So not only can he not sleep, but he doesn't even feel tired. He also tells the doctor that in a few months' time, he will be dead.
This sounds like the opening of a mystery novel. Doctor, in a few months' time, I will be dead. You
I'm
must
gonna
figure
die."
out what is wrong. May the future generations live because of me. Like it straight
Well,
up sounds like the intro to a mystery, like medical book or something.
at first, Dr. Cortelli was like, "I think you're being a little bit pessimistic." And he was like, "No, you don't understand. Like, it is established. I am going to die, but I want you to study me so that you can maybe help others in the future. Like, it's going to happen regardless. You need to get on board here." So he wanted to help his family, and then he essentially volunteered to be a test subject, which kudos to him because he did contribute quite a bit. He's the one that in that show, there are videos of him in a room while his brain is deteriorating. He gave the researchers all of his family history with medical records showing the curse that dated back centuries. His declining health was documented, filmed, and studied from the time symptoms began, literally until his death. So in the videos, his eyes will like droop and then they become unfocused. They would close, but then immediately jerk back awake again. So he wasn't technically asleep, but he wasn't awake.
Oh,
Which is so much worse. They even tried, like, I'm sure some of you are like, "Oh, well, why didn't they give him sleeping pills? Why didn't they sedate him?" They tried. They tried to sedate him. This did not work either. Instead of putting him into a deep sleep, he would go into a coma-like state. But even this coma-like state, he's not getting sleep. So he was able to
it
go
wouldn't
into
repair the brain. It wouldn't do
No.
it. Oh,
It wouldn't do it. He was able to go into stages 1 and 2 of sleep, so like the lighter versions of sleep. But he was never able to enter stages 3 and 4 of sleep, the deep sleep. So he was never able to get the restorative sleep necessary to repair his brain, and he was trapped in a REM cycle or rapid eye movement sleep. Essentially, the state in which we dream is where he would become trapped, which sounds so awful to me. And he would even act out his dreams too, so it's not like his body was even getting rest. So like he would be moving his hands and shit, like combing his hair, or sometimes he'd stand up entirely. And like he told one of the doctors was there, and whenever he came to, he told the doctors, "Oh, I was giving a flower to the Queen of England."
oh, God!
So-
It's a waking nightmare. It is like that term. Like it's an actual waking nightmare.
Nightmare. And can you imagine, like his dreams sound, from what I know, don't sound that unpleasant. But let's say you were having nightmares this entire time. Instead of giving a flower to the queen, it's like Freddy Krueger shit. I don't know. I mean, regardless, it doesn't sound pleasant either way you spin it, but
No.
Hey y'all, spooky season is here. And if you're looking for a show to whet your appetite for a little haunted history, then I'd like to invite you to check out Southern Gothic, a chart-topping history podcast that explores some of the most infamous legends, folklore, ghost stories, and hauntings of the American South. We've covered all sorts of stuff from the Bell Witch of Tennessee to the disappearance of the Confederate submarine, the H.L. Hunley. Not to mention our deep dives into the local lore of some of America's oldest and most haunted cities, like New Orleans, Charleston, and St. Augustine. So, if you're ready for a little good old-fashioned Halloween storytelling with a commitment to quality historical research, then be sure to check out Southern Gothic today. It's available now on all your favorite podcast apps.
Serial killers, strange disappearances, unexplained mysteries, terrible disasters. I'm Nate Hale, and in my show, The Conspirators, I'm here to tell you all the stories from history your teacher never told you about. Hear the real story behind the Bermuda Triangle, or about the history of people drinking blood to stay young, or about the serial killer operating in Nazi-occupied Paris, or what dark secret lurked within the walls of a Scottish castle. In my show, The Conspirators, I take you on a journey through some of the darkest corners of history, where you'll hear about the folklore, myths, and misconceptions behind some of the darkest events that ever happened. Listen to The Conspirators on Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, sometimes the truth really is stranger than fiction.
Yeah, so that was actually during the time period where he could still communicate before he lost his ability to speak. And 9 months after the onset of his symptoms, on July 21st, 1984, he was dead. So he didn't get the 18 months that is average. He got 9 months. 9 months from his symptoms starting until he was gone.
Dang, that is quick.
Yeah, very fast. And I mean, I don't know. Kudos to him because, like, he knew about it, caught it, and then said, hey, study me. He donated his brain to science to try to solve the mystery, and they put his brain on dry ice, like, immediately after he passed away, and then shipped it to the Institute of Pathology at Case Western Reserve University. His brain arrived to a Pier Luigi Gambetti, and Gambetti was a student of the Lugeresi guy we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
His autopsy showed the destruction of his thalamus. For those that don't know, we don't really know much about how the thalamus operates in general, but we think it's kind of similar to a switchboard that is composed of nuclei, and these nuclei can affect our movement, memory, consciousness, ability to reason. So in Silvano's brain, 90% of the neurons in 2 of the nuclei in his thalamus were completely destroyed. Gone.
Oh,
entirely.
that sounds awful. Like, I don't even know necessarily what specifically it does. But if you told me that 90% of a part of my brain was destroyed,
Just gone.
I'd be like, yeah, I sound dead.
But this also tells us that, like, I mean, by deductive reasoning, we can assume that these 2 specific nuclei play a huge role in our ability to sleep, our sleep and wake cycles. And it also tells us that FFI targets a certain part of the brain, which is, I don't know, that's weird to me. Like, these 2 neurons in your thalamus are targeted. I don't know. It's hard for me to wrap my brain around. But 2 years after Silvano died, that is when they came up with fatal familial insomnia in the year 1986. Not only did Gambetti study Silvano's brain, but he also received brain tissue from other members of Silvano's family that suffered from the disease after they passed away. Because if you have this big family to study, why not? He had a distant cousin whose name was Teresa. She was 36 years old and she had 2 young sons, which makes it that much shittier. Like I said earlier, Silvano was 53, I think.
Yeah, he was older. He wasn't like really old, but he was older.
And
how old was she?
Teresa, 36, with 2 young sons. Fucking horrific. That'd be like 7 years from now for me. I don't know. That's scary to think about. Yeah, her symptoms began at 36.
Like, imagine
and
you're
I'm pregnant,
at that point,
so it would be
son.
It'd be about the same, except she had 2 young boys. Which, I mean, hell, I don't know. I could have 2 young boys at that point too. Yeah, it's terrifying. So her symptoms began. She would become super confused, and she would bump into stuff like chairs and other furniture. Was one of her beginning symptoms. And she's also featured in the episode that I watched. You can see videos of her. She has these dark circles under her eyes, I'm assuming from exhaustion. And then she just has this stare into nothing, really. Just, I don't know. It's sad. She got to the point where she could no longer recognize her family members, nor could she speak or comprehend the changes that were happening to her, other than knowing, like, hey, I guess that this has happened to family members before me. So her uncle, brother, and her father all passed away from FFI as well. But she had a sister who remains alive. And her sister would bring her pictures and stuff to try to be like, hey, I'm your sister. Do you remember me? And so it was gone. She couldn't pinpoint anybody in her family before she passed away.
God, at least
terrible.
People with dementia are able to sleep.
Yeah. This is literally like one of the worst things I imagine that could happen to you. Hopefully we find a cure soon. Because they're like, I don't know, it makes you think it's like an old disease. It is not old. there are families that just because it's rare does not mean that it is gone.
It sounds like it is an old disease. It is something that's been around for quite a while. It's one of those things that because we're talking about a genetic disorder, people couldn't pinpoint what it was. And so it historically got confused with other stuff. Oh, it's schizophrenia. Like for a more modern thing. Oh, it's like anxieties, or it's like all these other stuff. Or as my wife would say it, for in Trinidad, they would just say, oh, you just have worries.
Yeah, you have worries. Oh, it's rough. It's very rough. The show follows 3 families who are affected by it, one of them being Silvano's, one of them being the brother and sister pair I discussed earlier. And then there is another woman whose mother passed away, and she got tested, and she too is positive for it. And her and her husband like switched up their entire lives and are now scientists at Harvard working on prion research to try to find a cure for her. Shit's fucking insane. They have no background in science, and then they're like, okay, we need to do something. And just dove right in. So, when observing Teresa's brain tissue, Gambetti noticed there was an area that contained the spongiform degeneration we previously discussed, leading him to discover that this was in fact a prion disease because of the formation of lesions. So he's the one who put 2 and 2 together. Like, okay, prion disease. Prion diseases are fairly new in medical history. It was thought it could only cause disease in animals for a very long time, like mad cow disease. Obviously not true. Everyone is born with a prion protein. Humans produce it all the time, and that is completely normal. But if the protein goes through a change in shape, that is when you have a problem. So there are ways that proteins can misfold, leading them to become abnormal. So let's say you have a normal protein here, and then suddenly it folds over. And then it touches the protein directly beside it. And then that protein folds over. And then that protein touches the next one. And then it folds over. And
so basically
on
it just
and so
becomes kind of
forth.
like a domino.
Literally a domino effect of your prion proteins until all of them are fucked. So, yeah. That is what we see happening. And the weird thing is that prions are non-living organisms that are now causing disease, which is essentially unheard of. Like we're always
for the
taught.
longest time historically, it's viruses. Oh, it's bacteria. Oh, it's like there's actually something that is identifiable and traceable. I'm like, yeah, you're not going to be able to use antibiotics on viral stuff because it's not a bacteria. So it's not going to work in that regard, but it's still something that is alive. It is still something that is trying to replicate itself in order to be able to infect a host, and from there be able to continue itself. Like that's the whole point. But a prion disease, there's no replication of that outside of sex. Like you're not, well, I say not exactly for all prion disease, but I mean that in case of this, like it's a genetic disease that the only way for it to continue itself is to be passed down, which I guess that's something that would happen where if it's longer, because if this killed children, the disease would basically be wiped out. Because if it wiped out most people by the time that they were 12.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, but since the average age is 50,
so.
you said, a person by the age of 50 is more than likely going to have kids and potentially even grandkids.
That is so weird. I did not even think about that. That is so true. That's the reason that it's still a thing, is because we have babies. And then for the majority of people, it's only just now really becoming known like, oh, you're dying of fatal familial insomnia instead of you're dying from a family curse that's been passed down from generation to generation. And you may or may not die. You have a 50-50 chance.
Dear Lord.
Yeah, it's not the best. Not the best. You can be tested to see if you carry the genetic mutation. So like I said, those 2 siblings, they tested themselves. They both carry the mutation. So essentially a ticking time bomb. If a family member has it, you have a 50-50 shot of having it too. As of 2024, there's still not a cure, but there is research ongoing And I do think it's important to like talk about it because I had never heard of this before. A coworker mentioned it to me. He actually gave me a lot of the information in this episode, and so did the TV episode that I watched. But he wrote a research paper on it, and he was talking about it at work. That's where I heard about it. I was like, "What the fuck is this?" Aside from genetic testing, though, there are other guidelines to follow to diagnose someone with fatal familial disease. I'm not saying any of these to scare anybody. It is genetic.
Gabby is going to have a horrible time editing together the audio of this. She's probably not even going to try to listen. She's just going to go, no. We're just any gaps, any weird things. Yeah, we're just going to leave that in here. I'm not listening to this at all.
I don't think Gab should edit this one for real because this is not ideal. This is not an ideal episode.
So,
in the slightest. Because like the siblings, it was
so that she can freak out about it and go, and because she's the type of person that would WebMD something and go, yes, I have cancer from a stomach ache. Like she is the exact person that would do that.
These and give her comfort in knowing that it is genetic, but then at the same time, I feel like I should whisper this because like those siblings, like, yeah, in the case of that one Italian man, his dates back hundreds of years, but in the two siblings, it dates back to their grandma. Their grandma somehow had a genetic mutation that was not passed down to her.
Does that mean that it's a genetic mutation or could it have been there earlier and it's just wasn't really detected?
They do talk about that in the episode, how it could have potentially been in some of their earlier ancestors. Like, let's say these people died of other shit before it had a chance to become onset. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like a car accident or I don't know, something, a number of things. They could have died in many other ways. So even though we think that it started in grandma, maybe it potentially started farther back. We just don't know. But if it did just up and decide to start at grandma, like her DNA they describe it as her DNA having like a typo, and then that typo is now stuck and being passed down. That's terrifying.
That is terrifying. What's also kind of interesting is like, wait, hold on. So if the typo happens specifically at birth, then, right? Or like upon conception, like that is where the typo happens. It's not like someone doesn't have it and then all of a sudden they turn 27 and then, oh man, now one of their proteins just went and just completely changed themselves because that means
you're born that way.
Because if that was the case and that didn't happen, then technically speaking, someone could have 3 kids and then the 4th kid might be affected if it happened at a later stage in life. That means from the point of conception, something was wrong in there, which meant that there was either a mutation with the sperm or the egg or something happened there.
Something. I don't know. It's scary to think about regardless. But anyway, symptoms. So let's say you don't have a family member that has this and you haven't done genetic testing. Here are some ways that you can scare yourself shitless.
Thanks.
These are the guidelines to diagnose someone.
It's a good thing I didn't plan on sleeping tonight anyway, because I'm specifically behind on so many videos that I have to make a bunch.
I am so sleepy. I'm still probably going to sleep like a baby. I'm being honest. I'm tired. I'll put on Forensic Files and go right to sleep listening to murder. So 1, obvious disruptions to the natural sleep cycle must occur in the patient, or polysomnography must be performed if sleep-related symptoms are not present. So your sleep cycle, your natural sleep cycle has to have disruptions. And then 2, a minimum of 2 of the following symptoms similar to, I cannot pronounce that.
Creutzfeldt-Jakob
disease must be present. So a minimum of 2 of what I'm about to say. Visual hallucinations, depression, anxiety, personality changes, disinhibition, or listlessness. I have depression and anxiety.
Yeah. I was like, depression and anxiety. Maybe they were on to something when they said you got worries.
All right. Next on the list is ataxia. Next up, visual. How is that a symptom? How's visual a symptom? I don't know about that. Myoclonus.
What are this? Okay, hold on. I don't know
what these things are. I'm not going to lie to you, Steve.
Did you
I don't
not
know
verify what these things were before putting it in? You're like, oh yeah, here's the symptoms. I'm just going to put it in here.
No, I just put them in there. I've heard of ataxia before.
Okay,
I feel like I mentioned it in a previous episode.
So ataxia. All right, hold on. What is ataxia? Ataxia describes poor muscle control that causes clumsy movements that can affect your walking and balance. It's like
the woman that was bumping into shit
exactly
out of nowhere.
Okay, I don't know what visual would be because that doesn't help me. I guess visual impairment, like you're not able to see things very well or you're not able to focus on them.
Yes, that's another thing that was listed in the documentary thing I watched was that someone's vision was getting fucked up. What is myoclonus?
Muscle jerks. Myoclonus is muscle jerks. So like I have muscle spasms at different times. And it's like a common thing that is more common with men is that specifically in sleep, like we'll suddenly like jerk randomly in our sleep or other stuff. And it's like, that's a common thing.
Yeah. I've had that happen to me before. Like if I fall asleep and I think I'm falling off a building in my sleep.
Yeah. And then the final thing, I guess, from there, the cognitive defects, it's like, yeah, if you've reached the point that your mind is literally degenerating, then yeah, there's going to be cognitive effects.
I don't like these listing though, because visual hallucinations. Okay, so I don't really have visual hallucinations unless you count the.
You're now WebMDing yourself, Brenna. Bren, you are WebMDing yourself right now over something that you made.
I am a little clumsy. Okay, so you have to have 2 of those. You have to have obvious disruptions to your natural sleep cycle. And then you have to have a minimum of one of the following: weight loss exceeding 10 kilograms within a 6-month period.
Wait a minute. That's like a reasonable thing to hope for. 10 kilograms is like 24 pounds, something like that. So if you lose 24 pounds in 6 months, that sounds like a relatively successful diet that you've lost like 4 pounds over the course of a month. For 6 months. It's like, that's not unobtainable. That's pretty reasonable.
These are a terrible way. No offense, guy. No offense, Zalan Khan, in your article that lists these that I got this from. But the last one is vegetative symptoms such as hyperhidrosis,
obstipation, trachea, and hyperthermia.
I have the tachycardia. I have tachycardia because I have Graves' disease. So I do not like these. I could literally diagnose.
I guess if your body is just like constantly sweating and it's just like profusely sweat, like I get that one.
Yeah, because he was talking about how like super sweating was one of the symptoms. That one guy was like,
what is hyperhidrosis?
I've never even heard of whatever that.
Hyperhidrosis is, hyperhidrosis is excessive sweating. So I guess that goes with the hyperthermia as like feeling really warm and then excessive sweating.
What's obstipation?
Obstipation is...
What is it?
The German word for constipation. Oh. It means you can't take a shit. It's literally just your They could have just said constipation then. And it's like anyone would have I literally just like type it in. And what it says?
That is a German name up there. The Creutzfeldt Jacob.
Never mind. I misread it here. I glanced down at my phone and it says AI. It says the AI over. So this is why you take things with a grain of salt, especially when staring at it. It says the German word Verstopfung translates to constipation in English. It also means jam or blockage. So obstipation means severe or complete constipation. So that's the English word for it. But again, you could literally just say constipation, severe constipation.
Well, that's a German name up here at the top that you read earlier, ain't it? Creutzfeldt Jacob disease?
Yes. Creutzfeldt, so it would be Creutzfeldt Jakob, I'm pretty sure is what it would be.
Yeah, so maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. Anybody could look at these. Gabby doesn't need to edit this because anyone could look at this list of symptoms. And I qualify right now for having fatal familial insomnia if I'm diagnosing myself from these.
That's
symptoms.
fun.
So just go with genetic testing, guys. If you have a feeling that if you have suffered from a familial curse and you don't know what it is, go ahead and get yourself genetically tested. And that's all I got. That is all I got. That's your depressing story for the day.
Well, I think we're going to go ahead and end things here for today, at least, so I can then pass this off. Don't you dare, this because we're filming 2 episodes right now that we're making here.
Yeah. The next one's
don't
jolly.
you dare say a single word of any of this to Gabby, who's going to be doing this one right after.
The next episode after this is like a fun one. Well, it's a Patreon exclusive, and I keep saying I'm going to finish my cryptid alphabet episode. This one is it. This one will be the end. The 50 states, all the cryptids of the 50 states. Me and Gab are about to finish it, and that one will be fun, and it will not be doom and gloom. This one is making me just about as paranoid as I was with the Hat Man. So
yeah, I believe that. All right. Well, then I guess we will see you all here later.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Subscribe to Patreon if you want to hear me and Gabby. We love to ramble on our Patreon. And thank Steve for stepping in, because this is not a Gab-friendly episode.
No, it is not. But this was the mystery of everything. Not. I am Stucky from the history of everything. And thank you all here for listening. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Bye, guys.